My two previous videos talk about starting seeds in August for overwintering and then for earlier flowering the next year. And for that, you need hardy perennials or hardy annuals. So I did a video on the perennials and a video on the annuals. So in this video, I thought, why don't I do a quick demonstration for those that are super beginners or those who just don't sow in August, what I mean and how I sow them. And right at the end, I'll show you why it's the perfect time for sowing them. And I've chosen two annual varieties and a perennial. But if you want to choose other perennials or other hardy annuals, check out my other two videos, my two previous videos, where I go into a bit more detail. I think I do 10 or more different varieties that you can sow now. And I'll link all those videos in the description below. But now let's get back to this video. And in this video, we're going to sow Echinacea, which is the perennial that we're going to sow. And we're going to sow Larkspur and Calendula. And I covered in those previous two videos why it's a good time to sow it now. So let's have a look at how we can sow them. And the first thing we're going to look at is the compost. And you can use homemade compost or store-bought compost, whichever you prefer. Because seeds are so tiny, and obviously in the first instance, they produce tiny roots, we need the compost to be open and very easy for those roots to navigate through. And so for that reason, we're going to add some sharp sand. And I just use cheapo sharp sand, builder's sharp sand from the DIY store. Now, there are other products you can add, such as perlite and I don't know the other names of them, but this is no nonsense gardening. So I wanted to give you the cheapest and most readily available option, which is the sharp sand, because anyone can get it and anyone can afford it. It's like £3.49. And for an average gardener, that whole bag is going to last you at least a year, if not longer. It also happens to be really handy to have around for like weighing down any temporary gazebos, pergolas, tents, or anything that you might have up in a little bit of a wind. I use the sand also to, create little weights for those as well. So it's just really handy to have around. So you just mix up your sharp sand, and I do about a quarter to a third sharp sand per compost. So that's for 1 part sand, you would use 3 parts compost. And you can tell when you mix it up, it takes out the darkness out of the sand. You can just see the sand slightly filtering through the compost, and that's what you want. Now, if you have your homemade compost or you have a slightly cheaper, rougher compost, you can also use a sieve, and I use a homemade sieve if I need it. But generally, by adding the sand and then maybe just rubbing the compost through your fingers and mixing it up thoroughly, it should break down any lumps and give you a nice fine tilth for your seeds and for those little baby roots. Just pick out any large lumps, sticks or debris, anything like that. Now, the next thing you want to do is water your compost, and the key is to water it before you sow your seeds, whether that be to water it all in a big pile like you would if you're mixing cement, or water it once it's in the pots and then mix it up. But you need the water to be evenly distributed throughout that compost. What you don't want to be doing is trying to water and moisten your compost once you've sown your seeds. You already want that done before you sow the seeds so that you don't dislodge any seeds. So water it however is best for you, either in the pots already or mix it all as a job lot. That's up to you. Just make sure you water it before you sow your seeds. So the first seed we're going to sow is the Echinacea, which is the perennial that we're sowing. And I'm going to sow a little, funky variety of it. And the first thing we're going to do is look at the back of the seed packet to just make sure that we've got everything. And it says we need a propagator. So we're going to make one out of nothing, out of something we have lying around for free. And then we need it to be a certain temperature. Well, August is a great time because it is very warm now. And then we need to keep it moist. So these are the essentials. Now then we're going to open the packet, look at our seeds, and we can see we only had 10, kind of mean. We only have 10 seeds. So that's fine. We can sow the seeds on the surface of the soil. When you sow the seeds on the surface of the soil, just gently press them in equally apart if you have seeds large enough to do that. Sometimes that's a little bit more difficult, and I'll show you in a minute what to do if your seeds are smaller. I'll show you when I do the larkspur. So what you want to do is just press your seeds into the soil so that it has contact, and then you want to put a light covering over the seeds. That helps weigh them into the damp soil as well. Now, to keep them moist, we're going to add a propagator, but we're not going to rush out and buy a propagator every time we want to sow some seeds. We're just going to make one from a bottle. So we're going to use an average water bottle. If you don't have one, your friends will probably have one. You can pick some up recycling. Or honestly, if you don't have any, you can just go and buy some water and just drink it and then use the bottles. And then you just cut the bottles, the water bottles, and you can do that really easily with scissors. You don't need any special equipment. And then we're going to use the top half, the dome half with the lid, but we can take the lid off so we get some airflow and we can get some rain if you were to keep them out of doors, which with these, you could keep them out of doors because they are hardy annuals and hardy perennials, which I explained in the previous video, but that means they are more likely to survive the winter. They can survive it, even if they start growing now. So we put the lid on, the propagator lid on, and then we're going to bottom water that later. But first, I'm going to show you how to do the larkspur. So the larkspur is almost exactly the same, but as you can see, the seeds are much smaller and I kind of spilt them on the surface. The other thing I did with the larkspur, which I meant to do with the first one, is to create a dent with your propagator lid. Just screw that into the soil so you can see the circle within which you must sow the seeds, because you don't want to sow the seeds around the edge where the propagator won't cover them. So you can mark yourself a little circle before you even start. If you have these really tiny seeds like these larkspur, you can just use your finger to smush them around the surface of the soil. Just keep going round and round and round, and eventually they should be pretty evenly distributed. I find it works because I've done it lots of times with really small seeds, and it seems to give me a fairly even distribution. As with the Echinacea, you need to cover them with no more than sort of a few millimeters of compost and sand. That's it. And then again, you put the propagator lid on. And then the next is the calendula. The calendula is the easiest. The calendula is an annual. It's the easiest to sow. And frankly, you could just grow these straight into the ground. They do self-seed as well. They are so easy to grow. But if you're a little bit nervous and you want to learn and you want to monitor seeds more carefully and chart their progress, because that does help you to learn when you're growing seeds, to be able to see how they grow, how quick they grow, how they germinate, etc. And also just to take a close-up care of them, then you learn a lot more just about seeds in general, sowing seeds in general. So that really helps. But calendula are super easy. But we're going to put the propagator on as well on these. I'm going to put the date on all of these on the top of the bottle. And then we'll take them into the greenhouse. But I must stress, you do not have to. If you don't have a greenhouse, do not despair. You can just put them outside somewhere, not too baking hot, not in too much direct sunlight. The ideal would be some gentle light, some gentle sunlight, maybe under the tree, a dappled tree, some dappled shade or something like that, because you don't want them to bake and dry out. The other thing I should have said before I got to this stage is that you can just use the bottle as well. If you really are on a tight budget, you don't want to have to go out and buy plant pots, you can actually just use the bottom half of the water bottle as a plant pot. But make sure you poke some holes in the bottom so that it's got drainage just like a plant pot, and so that when we bottom water it, it can suck the water up. Whether you're keeping them outside or in the greenhouse, you need a sort of a basin to put them in. I'm going to use this foil tray here. It's very shallow and that's all you need. And I'll put them in here. They don't need watering right now because the soil is already moist from when we wet it before we even started. But in a couple of days' time, you might want to start thinking about bottom watering, just a centimetre or so of water every other day or whatever. Make sure the surface of the soil doesn't dry out. But similarly, don't overwater it. So don't have it sitting in a basin of water because that will also rot it. And before you know it, you're going to have seedlings. And because you've taken care to spread them out, you won't even need to transplant them for quite a while. Now, I wanted to show you why it was a good time to plant them now. Looking at the back of the packet, you can see it says the temperature here. The ideal temperature is 50 to 20 degrees C. And as you can see here on my thermometer, that it is exactly that. So, and tomorrow we've had a bit of a heat wave, so it's been a bit hotter actually, but tomorrow is going to be cooler, so it will be within the range. Or as I say, you can just put them outside. And that's it. Hopefully by next year, you're going to have some gorgeous early flowering plants. So I hope that video helped you get started with your seeds, or at least motivate you to start your seeds this weekend. And if it did, don't forget to subscribe, like, and I'll see you again in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.